talking to Matt Riley today from the Jordan Porco Foundation, and this is a sensitive subject. We're talking about young adult suicide. First things first, how did you find yourself with the Jordan Porco Foundation, and what is it?
So how I came to work for the organization was I actually lost my daughter to suicide about 4.5 years ago.
How old
when
was she?
She was 15. She was a sophomore in high school. And I had met the Porco family shortly after that time and had talked with them and liked them a great deal. And the organization was in the building stages at that point. I was in the not-for-profit world. And a couple of years later, they were at the point where they were looking to make a bigger investment in the organization. I then joined them.
And they had lost a son too. So
they
this
did.
Is all
they did.
Jordan was their son.
Yeah, the namesake of the organization, Jordan. Jordan died by suicide his freshman year of college. And as you would imagine, as any parent would be, they were incredibly distraught and desperate for answers and desperate to do something. And so they started the foundation, Jordan Porco Foundation, and they were basically looking for an opportunity to help other families avoid suffering the same type of tragedy, and that's the work that we're engaged in day in and day out.
You mentioned to me that you're starting to get into schools because this is a foundation that is peer-to-peer.
Right.
So it's getting other kids to notice things and talk about things. And you and I talked about before we started to tape this about suicide. As soon as you mention that to people, they really don't want to talk about that.
Yeah.
It's too personal. Maybe they've been touched by it. How is it that you've been able to be a part of this so far and talk about it? Is there a healing that's involved in this?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think, for one of the things that I love about working for the Jordan Porco Foundation is invariably all of the staff at the organization have been touched in some way by suicide. So we're all personally affected, but we all use that grief and try to channel it in a positive way. And it fuels sort of, I know it's a little cliche, but the passion behind the work that we're doing. And I think it drives us to what so far has been fairly incredible success for what started out as a very small nonprofit. You mentioned that that we're working with schools. We are started working with colleges and universities and have been incredibly successful on college campuses. We're in somewhere around 25 states now, working with various colleges and universities, but we started with one college in Connecticut in 2011.
Which one?
Eastern Connecticut State University. So we've grown from there incredibly. We working with virtually all of the colleges in Connecticut, and then we expanded out from there into Massachusetts, New York, all throughout New England, and now we're working in California, Oregon, Iowa, Texas. So we're all around the country and hope to continue national expansion.
How many kids are taking their lives every year, if we talk about teenagers and/or kids in college?
Yeah, well, what I can tell you is that it is the second leading cause of death for individuals aged 15 to 25. And that's a pretty shocking statistic. Most people are pretty blown away when they hear that. They had no idea. And what's tragic about this is what we often say is that suicide is 100% preventable. Yet it's the only form of death for young adults that has increased significantly over the last 30 years. All other forms have decreased. So you kind of think, what's going on? I'll tell you that 1 out of every 10 college student contemplates suicide, and it's even worse in high school. I think it's 1 out of 6 in high school. Don't quote me on that.
So it's recognizing the facts, the looks on kids. You have on your website signs that somebody may need help. It's isolation, trouble in school, mood behavior changes, seems depressed or anxious. Depression, anxiety go together.
Yep.
Risk-taking, recklessness, self-harm, talking suicide, eating issues, sleeping issues, experience trauma. And this one in particular, giving away possessions.
Yeah.
Explain that.
Yeah, I mean, and that's why, and peer-to-peer is so important. I think when you ask about, our programs, why are they successful? It's because we focus on the peer-to-peer, because we know that even if you as a parent have done a very good job of creating a safe environment for your children to come and talk to you about the distress that they're experiencing, the issues that they're experiencing, that's terrific. That's great, and I applaud that. But the reality is, what science tells us is that kids turn to kids, and they're telling their peers, and they're displaying these behaviors to their peers first. A lot of times they're hiding them from their parents. I know that in my case with my daughter, and certainly in Jordan's case as well, we didn't know the extent of the distress that our children were suffering. But oftentimes their friends will. And knowing that is why we focus on educating peers to understand the warning signs, the signs that you just mentioned, which are the typical signs of someone who might be contemplating suicide.
You have dealt with this with your daughter, and it's day to day. Nobody ever gets over that. Yeah. When you think about this, were there signs that you missed?
Yeah, most definitely. My daughter Jenna had a journal that she kept, and I was aware that she had a journal, but I didn't.
But kids keep diaries.
They do,
right?
and I didn't read it, and I wish I had, because having had the opportunity to read it after the fact, it was pretty clear, almost instantaneously, that this was a child that was in need of help. I didn't know that. She did a very good job of hiding it from myself, from her mother, so it's interesting. I had a friend contact me about 6 months after we lost our daughter, and he said, I'm concerned about my daughter. And I said, I'm no expert, simply because I've lost my child. But he said, well, what do you recommend I do? I said, well, does she have a journal? And he said, I don't think so. And I said, well, you should get her one and then read it. And he said, but I don't want to invade her privacy. And I said, I respect that, I understand that, but do.
Be a parent.
Do, especially if you're concerned about her, because think of the alternative. The alternative is unthinkable.
Do you think that teens and young adults mean to check out, to die? And every case is different, or is it an ask for help?
I think that that's one of the truly difficult things about this work, is it really runs the spectrum, truly. You have a lot of impulsivity with young adults, with teenagers.
Sure.
And so, you may have instances where you have a young person that completes suicide because they're living with something difficult in the moment, and they just don't grasp or have the maturity to understand that things will improve. And that's why we're talking about get help, talk to somebody, open the conversation so that you can be helped. Now, on the other end of the spectrum, you might have a child with clinical depression. Very different scenario. And, there's all the difficulties that come along with that. So it's not one thing. I'll share with you, Anne, that a lot of times people think, well, look, the kids that are most vulnerable tend to be the ones that are isolated, that are alienated. The reality is that many of the most vulnerable young people are those that are the star athlete, are the ones that are high honors, because they feel a tremendous amount of pressure to continuously succeed and perform. So, and it can also be that alienated child, that isolated child. So again, it really runs the spectrum, and it's why we're trying to take a broader approach to, again, educating young people to, let's look out for one another. Let's build, communities of inclusiveness.
Let's take a look at the first video that is on your website about your mission. All right, Fresh Check Day. What is that?
So Fresh Check Day is our signature program. It's the program that we started with, and it's the program that is designed for the college or university campus.
Even high school?
No, high school, we actually were working exclusively in the college market until just about a year ago, when we started to develop a new program called For What's Next, and that's our high school program. It's actually meant to be a program that focuses on a college student's transition from high school to college, because we were fortunate enough to commission a Harris poll, and in doing that we surveyed thousands of first-year college students, and we asked them if they were adequately prepared for college, and across the board the answer was no. And we know that that causes a lot of emotional turmoil, it causes a lot of stress, it causes a lot of the triggers that once a student transitions from high school to career or college, that can lead them down a path that they shouldn't be going down.
Well, they're going away from home for the first time, maybe far, far away.
Exactly.
It looked good on paper. I've got the sweatshirt. I'm going to go, to Miami or Colorado or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And then you get there, and then what?
Yeah, and it's just that. It's how do you handle relationships? How do you live independently? How do you deal with the substance abuse issue on college campuses that many first-year freshmen see? So a myriad of issues. But it's also, the For What's Next program is meant to educate young people, juniors and seniors in high school. Again, it's led by student leaders within that environment. And it's meant to deal with the issues that they're facing during that period of time as well, but also prepare them for the transition.
All right, very good. Let's look at the next video.
Sure.
Let's talk about hopelessness. Do teenagers, young adults, even know how to express that? They feel it, but if I tell somebody, then they're going to look at me differently.
Yeah, I mean, the big buzzword in this industry is stigma. And we do firmly believe that this will be the generation to end stigma. And that's because what we're seeing with this next generation coming up is they don't seem to have a lot of the
judgment.
Yeah, the judgment, others. Sort of the, they're more open about it. Honestly, they're more willing to talk about it. Of course, on the opposite side of things, they're exposed to a lot more than, certainly I was exposed to when I was their age.
Very difficult.
It's changed dramatically. There's a lot of anonymity on social media, so people can say things that can be very hurtful. So they're experiencing a lot of competition. They're experiencing, just some very difficult challenges in this day and age, but they also do seem to be more open about speaking about, the kinds of issues that in my generation were taboo, that you don't talk about that kind of, if somebody had a suicide in their family, you didn't know that because you didn't want people to know about that. Those are the kinds of things that we have to change. And so, we're very pleased to be part of a campaign with the state of Connecticut called One Voice, which is about starting the conversation and continuing the conversation, being okay with talking about it. And that's one of the things that we're trying to impose upon these young people.
We give a lot of lip service to mental health, but we're in a state right now which is in trouble money-wise. So, and we cut mental health. That gets cut a lot.
Yep.
That's part of what helps these kids stay healthy.
It is.
What do you say about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a shame. I mean, it's obviously a very difficult environment. There are cuts that that hurt in many different sectors and in many different ways. I think that the most important thing is that we remember to open the conversation, to not be afraid to talk about it. I mean, it's sort of like when we have a health condition, a medical health condition, we're not afraid to talk about that. But when you talk about a mental health condition, all of a sudden, all of the, the encumbrances come upon us where we just are afraid about how we'll be perceived, how people will look at us. And so it's about, treating it in the same way that we would treat a public health condition. If we had diabetes, if we had another medical condition.
If you break your arm, you fix it.
Right.
Right?
Exactly.
It should be that simple.
Exactly.
Let's take a look at one more video.
Sure.
From the looks of all your videos, your website, those of you who are talking about this, you mean business. You mean to get into schools and colleges and make this just part of the curriculum, I would guess. How many Connecticut schools are on board?
Yeah, so I don't know the exact figure, but what I can tell you is the majority of colleges and universities in Connecticut are working with us. The high school program, we've piloted it at 2 high schools in Connecticut, but based on feedback that we received, we've taken a little bit of a step back on that to retool it a little bit, and we're going to be relaunching it into the Connecticut marketplace probably after the summer of 2017.
And this will be your template for the rest of the nation?
Yeah, it's meant to be. What's interesting about the For What's Next program, the high school program, is there's a lot of different high school environments. There's boarding schools, there's private schools, there's public schools. So we're working with the curriculum writer right now to produce various iterations of the program that are appropriate for those different environments, so that we don't want to take a cookie cutter approach. The difficulty for the program as far as high schools are concerned is shelf space, quite frankly, right? It's with their limited amount of time during the day is how do you insert a new program into what's already a very busy curriculum. So it's about acknowledging the importance of it, that a student's emotional success is as important as their academic success. On the college front, we worked with 60 schools in 2016. We have a goal for 140 schools in 2017, which we have a plan to achieve. And then by 2020, we hope to be working with 750 colleges and universities in the United States, which represents about 15% of the entire U.S. market. So
how do people listening to this help you? Because if we don't help, the numbers keep going up.
Yeah, I mean, it's somewhat cliche, but probably the best way to support our organization is by making a financial contribution. I know that a lot of not-for-profits are very volunteer-centric. They're very volunteer-driven. We are, but most of the volunteers that support our work are the students on the campus, because our Fresh Check Day program, while there's a lot of oversight provided by my staff, our staff, as well as the counseling services department at the college, the reality is that student groups are the ones that are really running those events. We're very proud of that. So that's probably the best way to support the organization, and obviously just bringing awareness to the issues, not being afraid, encouraging people to talk about it. And we try to do forums around the state as well. We conducted one at St. Joseph's University in West Hartford back in September for the West Hartford community. That was very well received, where we had a panel of experts, and it was about getting the community to acknowledge that there's a major concern going on here. There's a major problem. We can't be afraid to talk about it. We can't be afraid to take action.
Have you saved lives already, do you think?
I think we have. It's very difficult. We do have metrics in place to measure the success of our work. We know that, for example, that 87% of the students that attend our events are able to identify 3 or more warning signs of suicide. We know those kinds of things. But what's even better is sort of the anecdotal stuff that we get. So we've heard students tell us that, I was blown away by your program. I attended and I visited counseling services and I tore up my suicide note in front of my counselor. When you hear things like that, that's about as good as it gets, and that's how you know that you're achieving your objectives.
Ever in your wildest imagination did you think you would be working for such an organization, doing the work that you're doing?
No, of course, I never thought I would lose a child. I never thought I would be in this situation. I guess I feel fortunate in that, that I'm able to commit myself to this work. I think we all feel, certainly I think the founders, Marisa and Ernie Porco, feel that, it's very much about, ensuring that the work that we do is a tribute, as a fitting tribute to the memory of our children, our lost children.
Thank you for doing this, and I hope everybody that hears this helps you. Matt Riley with the Jordan Porco Foundation. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you.
Spend all night kissing and the boss was right here, then who else is missing? Got a little sidetracked to find myself wishing I could find the keys to the door, but it's also a metaphor. Need to keep locked in the grocery store of my mind, just to save time. Skip right ahead to the nice ride. The harder we look, the